Welcome back to our channel. In this video, we reveal some of the most valuable coins in the world, coins that collectors and investors are willing to pay thousands or even millions for.
In the quiet corners of everyday change jars, forgotten drawers, and old coffee cans sitting in American homes, there may be something far more powerful than spare pennies. There may be a hidden key to life-changing wealth. And today, we are talking about one of the most talked about modern Lincoln cents in recent years, the 2009 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny era coin, a coin that collectors and online listings have sensationally pushed into discussions of extreme rarity and staggering value, claims reaching as high as hundreds of thousands, even approaching the mythical million-dollar conversations. But here is the question that should immediately grab your attention. What if the most overlooked coin in your possession right now is quietly sitting in plain sight, waiting to be recognized by someone who understands what the rest of the world ignores? And before you dismiss this as just another coin story, stay with me, because what unfolds here is not just about a penny. It's about awareness, timing, and the difference between ordinary change and extraordinary opportunity. Picture this. It is a normal day in 2009. The economy is still recovering, uncertainty is everywhere, and millions of Americans are holding onto every dollar and cent. The U.S. Mint releases the Lincoln Bicentennial Cent Series, a special commemorative redesign honoring Abraham Lincoln's legacy. These coins enter circulation quietly, passing from hand to hand, unnoticed, unappreciated, almost invisible in their own time. Now here's where the story becomes interesting. Among these coins, collectors began reporting anomalies. Some pennies appeared without a visible mint mark. Others showed unusual striking characteristics, doubling, or inconsistencies that sparked debate in numismatic circles. And as with many modern errors, scarcity became the driving force of fascination. Let me ask you something. Have you ever looked at a penny and thought, this could be worth a fortune, or did you simply toss it aside without a second thought? Most people do, and that's exactly where opportunity hides, in plain sight, disguised as insignificance. Now the story changes from discovery to pursuit, because knowing about a rare coin is one thing. Finding it is something entirely different. Still, demand is very real. And in the world of collectibles, perception often drives pursuit before price is ever confirmed. Now imagine this. A collector finds a coin that looks ordinary at first glance. It's copper-toned, slightly worn, nothing that screams life-changing discovery. But under magnification, subtle details begin to matter. Strike quality, design clarity, minting irregularities. These are the moments where ordinary perception breaks and curiosity takes over. If you're still holding coins from 2009 and you haven't checked them yet, congratulations. You're either about to feel extremely motivated or slightly annoyed you didn't do it sooner. But let's move deeper, because Act 2 is not just about coins. It's about psychology. Fear enters here, not fear of loss, but fear of missed opportunity. The idea that something valuable may have passed through your hands unnoticed. That moment when you realize wealth is sometimes not created, it is recognized. Excitement follows quickly after. Because once you understand that small objects can carry disproportionate value in collector markets, your entire perception of change shifts forever. And urgency builds naturally because coins are not infinite. Once they're spent, lost, or damaged, they are gone from the potential market forever. In the collector world, modern era coins continue to generate attention because they sit at the intersection of scarcity and accessibility. Unlike ancient rarities locked in museums or private vaults, these coins are still within reach of everyday people. That is what makes them so powerful and so emotionally charged. Some listings online have sensationally suggested extreme valuations for rare mint era examples, occasionally reaching ambitious figures that capture public imagination. While actual verified sales depend heavily on grading and authentication, the idea of a high-value modern penny continues to circulate because demand from collectors remains strong and global. But here is the truth that separates fantasy from fortune. Real wealth in coin collecting is not about hype. It is about knowledge applied at the right moment. And this is where your perspective matters most. Because whether you're a seasoned collector or someone who has never taken numismatics seriously, the same principle applies. Opportunity rewards attention. Let me bring this back to something simple. Right now, somewhere in the United States, someone is going through old coins and discovering something they almost overlooked. And in that moment, everything changes, not because the coin changed, but because awareness did. Now, a final question for you. If a penny, something most people ignore without hesitation, could potentially carry extraordinary value under the right conditions, how many other overlooked opportunities might already be in your life right now? And here is where the urgency becomes real. Because coins like these are not becoming more common. They are being spent, lost, and forgotten every single day. The longer they circulate unnoticed, the rarer intact examples become. So whether your goal is to build wealth, explore collecting, or simply ensure you are not missing hidden value in your own home, the message is the same. Pay attention to what others dismiss. Because in the world of rare coins, as in life, the biggest opportunities rarely announce themselves loudly. They sit quietly until someone finally looks closely enough to see them. And sometimes, that single moment of attention is worth far more than a penny. If you've ever dumped a jar of old pennies on the table and thought, there's nothing special here, just spare change, you might want to reconsider that moment, because what you're about to hear could change how you look at every single coin in your house. Not in a vague motivational way. In a real, people have quietly turned a single penny into life-changing money kind of way. Today we're diving deep into one of the most talked about modern Lincoln cents in the coin collecting world. The 2014 D Lincoln penny with rare mint errors that collectors have chased aggressively, and in some reported cases have been associated with listings and claims reaching astonishing figures, even into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, with viral stories pushing speculative valuations as high as $893,000 in extreme error condition hype markets. Now, before you laugh and say, a penny? Seriously? Pause for a second, because that reaction is exactly what has caused people to overlook real opportunities sitting in plain sight for decades. Let's begin. The screen fades in slowly. A single copper-colored penny spins in close-up under a spotlight. The sound is quiet, almost too quiet, because this isn't just about a coin. It's about what you've been walking past without noticing. Act 1 begins with a simple truth most people never question. Pennies are worthless. That's what we were all taught. Drop them in jars. Ignore them at checkout. Let them pile up in drawers next to old receipts and forgotten keys. A penny is what you don't care about. But here's where things get uncomfortable in the best possible way. Because while most people were ignoring pennies, collectors, dealers, and specialists were doing something very different. They were looking closer. Inspecting myntmarks, studying strike quality, searching for errors that escape casual eyes. And in that world, the 2014 D Lincoln cent became one of those modern curiosities that started turning heads. Now imagine this for a moment. You're holding a penny minted in Denver in 2014. Nothing unusual at first glance. But under magnification, something is off. Maybe it's a double die effect. Maybe it's an off-center strike. Maybe it's a rare die anomaly that only a fraction of coins ever show. And suddenly, that worthless penny starts behaving like something entirely different in the collector market. Here's the emotional twist most people miss. Scarcity doesn't care about age. It cares about rarity. And rarity can exist in something made yesterday just as easily as something made 200 years ago. Now, let's interrupt this for a second. Quick question for you. If I told you right now that something in your home, something you've ignored for years, could be worth more than your car, would you check it tonight? Most people say yes. Almost nobody actually does. And that gap between awareness and action, that's where opportunity lives. The camera zooms into a coin microscope scene. Slow, deliberate. Now, the 2014 D Lincoln cent isn't valuable just because it exists. It becomes valuable under specific conditions. We're talking about mint errors, striking mistakes, die clashes, doubling effects, or extremely unusual preservation states that create scarcity within circulation. In the coin world, errors are not flaws. They are signatures of unpredictability, and unpredictability creates demand. Some collectors specifically hunt for these anomalies because they represent something mass production was never supposed to produce: uniqueness. And when demand meets uniqueness, things start to escalate quickly. This is where reports, listings, and market excitement sometimes spiral. A coin that should be worth 1 cent becomes part of a bidding war mentality. And in rare cases, especially when hype, condition, and verification narratives collide, you see extraordinary figures discussed in online marketplaces and collector circles. This is how numbers like hundreds of thousands, or in viral claims, even figures like $893,000, enter the conversation. Now let's be clear and grounded for a moment. Those extreme numbers are not typical. They represent outlier hype scenarios, speculative listings, or rare collector-driven excitement, not everyday reality. But here's what is real. Properly authenticated mint errors can and do sell for significant amounts depending on rarity, demand, and grading. And this is where things get interesting for you, because most people never even look. They spend pennies without a second thought. They toss them into jars. They leave them in cars. They ignore them completely. Meanwhile, someone else is holding a magnifying glass. Let that sink in for a moment. Now imagine this: a collector sitting across from a table, carefully rotating a coin under bright light. There's silence, then a small nod. That nod means money. That nod means rarity confirmed. And suddenly, something you would have spent without hesitation becomes something you might never forget. Quick interruption. Here's a thought that might make you smile a little. If pennies are so useless, why do people still argue about them so seriously in auctions? Now the emotional tension shifts from curiosity to urgency. Because here's the truth that seasoned collectors understand very well. Opportunities in modern coin eras don't stay quiet forever. Once awareness spreads, competition increases. Once competition increases, availability disappears. And once availability disappears, prices begin to shift upward. Not because coins change, but because attention does. And attention is the real currency here. Right now, coins like the 2014 Lincoln cent, with unusual mint errors, are still circulating. Still sitting in collections. Still hidden in rolls, jars, inherited boxes, and forgotten drawers. And most people will never check. That is your advantage, but only if you actually act on it. Think about what happens when someone inherits a coin jar. They see pennies. They don't see potential. They see inconvenience. And so they cash it in, spend it, or ignore it. But in that exact moment, something rare could be leaving their hands forever. This is where the emotional tension sharpens. Fear of missing out isn't just a marketing phrase here. It's a pattern observed in real collecting behavior. The biggest regret stories in numismatics almost always start with the same sentence: "I had one of those and didn't know." So here's a simple challenge. No pressure, just awareness. The next time you see a 2014 Lincoln penny, don't dismiss it immediately. Look closer. Check for irregularities. Pay attention to details most people skip. Because the difference between 1 cent and something far more valuable often isn't obvious at first glance. It requires attention, and attention is rare. We end with a final perspective. We live in a world where people chase wealth through complexity: stocks, crypto, real estate, side businesses. And yet, sometimes value hides in the simplest places imaginable. A penny doesn't look powerful. So as you sit there, maybe thinking back to that jar of coins at home, ask yourself one final question. Not as hype, not as fantasy, but as reflection. What else have I already overlooked? Because sometimes wealth doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it's already sitting in your house, quietly waiting to be noticed. And if you take anything from this today, let it be this: don't underestimate what you've already been holding. Not every penny is life-changing, but the ones that are don't announce themselves. And that's exactly why the people who pay attention are the ones who end up ahead. If you want, I can also rewrite this into a tighter, viral YouTube retention-optimized version with exact timing cues on screen text and AI voice pacing. Imagine this for a moment. You're holding a simple 1-cent coin. It's been sitting in a drawer, maybe in an old jar, maybe inside a forgotten collection passed down through your family. You almost overlook it because, after all, it's just a penny, right? But what if that tiny piece of copper was secretly tied to one of the most talked about modern coin mysteries in the United States? One that collectors have reportedly linked to figures as high as hundreds of thousands of dollars. Today, we're diving into the world of the 2005 Lincoln 1-cent penny with no mint mark. A coin that looks ordinary at first glance, but has sparked intense debate, collector excitement, and viral claims of extraordinary value. Some listings and stories online have even suggested figures reaching as high as $699,000, fueling curiosity, skepticism, and a powerful question. Could something this small actually change your financial future? Now, before you dismiss this as just another internet rumor, stay with me, because the truth about coin errors, scarcity, and collector demand is where fortunes are sometimes made, and just as often, completely missed. Let's begin. In Act 1, we set the stage in a world most people walk through without ever noticing. The United States Mint produces billions of coins every year, and the 2005 Lincoln cent is one of them. Most were struck in Philadelphia and carry no mint mark by design, which already confuses many collectors. But what makes this era interesting is not the standard coin. It's the mistakes, the rare anomalies, the unexpected variations that slip past quality control. Think about it like this. Imagine a factory producing millions of identical keys, and one of those keys accidentally gets cut slightly differently. To most people, it's useless, but to the right lock, it becomes priceless. That's the essence of coin collecting at the highest level. And here's where things get interesting. Because in 2005, certain Lincoln cents have been reported with unusual characteristics, die errors, striking irregularities, and anomalies that passionate collectors actively hunt for. Some of these stories explode online, with claims attached to jaw-dropping valuations. And that's where the buzz around numbers like $699,000 begins to circulate. Now let's pause for a second. If you're thinking, there's no way a penny is worth that, you're not alone. Most people think that. And most people also overlook coins that could be worth significantly more than face value because they assume rarity always looks obvious. It doesn't. And that brings us into Act 2. This is where the search begins. Picture yourself going through an old coin jar tonight. You're not just looking at pennies anymore. You're scanning history. The 2005 Lincoln cent becomes more than currency. It becomes a potential clue. No mint mark? That's normal for Philadelphia issues. But what collectors are really watching for are errors. Things like double strikes, off-center impressions, die cracks, or unusual surface characteristics that shouldn't exist in a perfectly minted coin. Here's where things get exciting. In the world of numismatics, condition and rarity rule everything. A coin that looks identical to millions of others can become highly desirable if it carries a verified minting error and is preserved in exceptional condition. And let's be honest for a moment. This is where most people lose out. Not because they don't have the coins, but because they don't look closely enough. How many times have you spent pennies without a second thought? Now imagine one of those coins being part of a collector's dream set. But here's the twist. Not every claim online is accurate. Some listings exaggerate values to attract attention. And yet, even within that noise, real opportunities exist. Verified mint errors have sold in the thousands, sometimes far more, depending on rarity, certification, and demand. So when you hear numbers like hundreds of thousands, or even viral claims reaching into the high six-figure range, you should treat them as signals of interest in the market, not guaranteed price tags. Because in reality, the coin market is driven by collectors, auctions, and authenticity verification, not internet hype alone. Still, the excitement remains real. Now imagine this. You send a coin for grading, and it comes back confirmed as a rare mint error. Suddenly, what was once a forgotten penny becomes a highly sought-after collectible. That's the moment every collector dreams of. That's the moment where attention turns into opportunity. And yes, this is where urgency enters the story, because these coins are not being made anymore. Every year, they disappear into circulation, get damaged, get lost, or are unknowingly spent. The window of discovery is always closing. Let me ask you something directly. How many coins like that might already be sitting in your home right now? Now we move into Act 3. This is the turning point, the realization phase. Because once you understand what makes coins like the 2005 Lincoln cent potentially valuable, you never look at change the same way again. You start to notice details. You start to question what you've ignored for years. And that awareness alone is powerful. But here's where most people make a critical mistake. They assume value is obvious. That if a coin is worth something significant, it will look valuable. In reality, many high-value error coins look completely ordinary to the untrained eye. That is exactly why collectors spend decades building expertise, and why certification services exist to confirm authenticity and grade. So if you ever do find something unusual, the smartest move is not to guess, it's to verify. Because the difference between a common penny and a rare mint error can be life-changing in collector terms. And now, let's bring it back to that bold number you may have heard floating around, the $699,000 claim. In the world of viral coin stories, numbers like this often represent peak listings, rare auction excitement, or unverified market hype. While extraordinary sales do happen in numismatic history, they are extremely rare and depend on multiple verified factors aligning at once. What matters most is not chasing a headline number, but understanding the real principle. Rarity plus condition plus demand equals value. And that is where opportunity truly lives. So here's the final thought. Right now, across America, there are jars, drawers, old collections, and forgotten boxes filled with pennies that most people ignore completely. Among them could be coins with subtle errors, unusual strikes, or rare variations waiting to be discovered. Not every coin will be valuable, but some absolutely can be. And the difference between someone who benefits from that discovery and someone who doesn't often comes down to one simple action: paying attention. Because wealth is not always about what you earn. It's sometimes about what you already own and fail to recognize. If this story made you look at a penny differently, that's the point. Stay curious, stay observant, and never underestimate what history might be hiding in plain sight. If you've ever held a handful of loose change and wondered whether one of those pennies could quietly change your life, you're exactly the kind of person this story is for. Because today, we're not just talking about a coin. We're talking about possibility, timing, and the kind of overlooked detail that has turned ordinary Americans into unexpected success stories almost overnight. But here's the question that should immediately catch your attention. What if the penny sitting in your drawer right now is not ordinary at all? And before you dismiss that thought, ask yourself this. How many times have you spent coins without a second glance, assuming they were worth exactly 1 cent? When in reality, some of them carry stories, mistakes, and rare production quirks that collectors actively hunt for? Let's step into it. This is the world of the 2003 Lincoln cent, specifically the versions that have sparked confusion, debate, and in some cases, extremely high online valuations that have circulated as high as hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some listings and viral claims even suggest figures approaching $899,000. Though in the professional numismatic world, such numbers are highly controversial and depend heavily on condition, authenticity, and verified mint errors. Still, the excitement exists for a reason. Because in coin collecting, perception often moves faster than proof. And that's where your attention matters most. Now imagine this. You're sitting at home, maybe going through an old jar of pennies you've ignored for years. Most look dull, copper-toned, ordinary. But then one catches your eye. It looks slightly off. No mint mark where you expect one. A strange strike. A detail that doesn't quite match the rest. You pause. Most people wouldn't. Most people would shrug and move on. But this is exactly how major discoveries begin. Now let's rewind and understand what we're actually dealing with. The Lincoln penny has been one of the most widely produced coins in American history. By 2003, billions of pennies had already been minted across Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco facilities. Typically, coins minted in Philadelphia either carry a P mint mark or, in some cases, no mint mark at all, depending on the production era and strike policies. So when people talk about a 2003 no mint mark Lincoln penny error, confusion starts immediately. Is it rare? Is it a mistake? Or is it simply a normal Philadelphia strike being misidentified? Here's where the story gets interesting. In the world of coin collecting, rarity is not just about age. It's about deviation, something that breaks the expected pattern. A doublette, a misaligned strike, a planchet error, or even a coin that was never supposed to leave the mint in its current condition. And when collectors think they've found something unusual, excitement spreads quickly. Sometimes too quickly. Because in today's digital marketplace, a single listing can go viral and inflate perceived value far beyond verified auction results. That's how you start seeing claims of extremely high figures attached to coins that may or may not meet the criteria for those valuations. But here's where you need to stay sharp. Not every rare penny story is equal. Some are genuine mint errors that have sold for impressive amounts at certified auctions. Others are speculative listings, wishful thinking, or misidentified common coins. Now you might be wondering, so why is everyone talking about this 2003 penny specifically? The answer is simple: pattern recognition and hype. When collectors or casual sellers notice something that looks slightly different, like weak lettering, missing detail, or unusual surface texture, it often gets labeled as an error before being professionally authenticated. And that label alone can change perception dramatically. But let's take a step deeper into what genuine value actually depends on. In high-end numismatics, coins that reach extraordinary prices typically share three traits: verified mint error status, professional grading from top-tier services, and exceptional preservation quality. Without those three elements working together, even an interesting coin remains just that: interesting, not life-changing. Still, the emotional pull is undeniable, because everyone wants to believe they might be sitting on something overlooked. And that brings us to the most important part of this story. Let's say, hypothetically, you find a 2003 Lincoln cent that appears to have no mint mark and shows unusual characteristics. What do you do next? Most people make the first critical mistake here. They rush to sell it online immediately. That urgency often destroys value instead of creating it. Professional collectors do the opposite. They slow down. They verify. They document. They send coins to grading services like PeaceGS or NGC, where authenticity and condition are evaluated under strict standards. Because in this world, trust is currency. Now here's a reality check that might surprise you. While sensational listings online may claim extremely high figures like $899,000, verified auction results for Lincoln cents, even rare error varieties, are typically far more modest, though still potentially valuable, depending on the specific error and grade. And yet, the excitement remains powerful because of one undeniable truth. Rare coin collecting has produced real million-dollar discoveries in other categories of U.S. coins. That history keeps hope alive, and hope drives attention. Let's shift the perspective for a moment. Imagine you're not just looking for a coin. You're looking for an opportunity most people walk right past without noticing. That's the mindset difference between someone who casually spends coins and someone who understands how value is created in overlooked places. Now here's where things get even more interesting. If you ever find a coin that you suspect is unusual, the worst thing you can do is assume its value based on internet listings alone. The best thing you can do is treat it like an asset waiting for verification. Because the real market doesn't reward assumptions. It rewards authentication. And this is where many people experience a shift in thinking. They start realizing that wealth isn't always about finding something new. Sometimes it's about recognizing what's already in circulation, already in your possession, already sitting quietly in a drawer. Now, let's bring this full circle. Whether the 2003 Lincoln cent no mint mark story turns out to be a genuine mint error or simply a misunderstood coin, the lesson remains powerful. Opportunity often hides in plain sight. And in the world of rare coins, education is what separates disappointment from discovery. So the next time you hear about a penny allegedly worth thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, don't dismiss it instantly. But don't believe it instantly either. Instead, investigate, verify, understand. Because in this space, knowledge doesn't just protect you. It positions you. And if there's one final thought to leave you with, it's this. The difference between a coin worth 1 cent and a coin worth life-changing money is rarely the coin itself. It's the story, the verification, and the awareness of the person holding it. So the question isn't whether rare pennies exist. The real question is, are you paying enough attention to notice them when they pass through your hands? And if you are, then you're already ahead of most people who will never look twice at what could be, in the right circumstance, one of the most surprising financial discoveries hiding in American pocket change today. If you've been sitting on old pennies thinking they're just pocket change, what you're about to hear could completely shift the way you look at every coin in your house, your drawers, even that forgotten jar in the garage. Because hidden in plain sight, among ordinary-looking cents, are rare mint anomalies that collectors have been chasing with serious money, sometimes life-changing money. And today, we're diving into one of the most talked about modern Lincoln cent mysteries in collector circles, the 1998 no-mint mark Lincoln penny era phenomenon, a coin that has sparked intense debate, viral claims, and reported valuations reaching as high as $777,000 in certain high-end collector discussions. Now, before you dismiss that number as unbelievable, stay with me. Because the real story here isn't just about a penny. It's about timing, awareness, and how ordinary people have turned overlooked coins into extraordinary financial breakthroughs. It starts in the most unremarkable way imaginable. You're sorting coins, maybe after a grocery run. Maybe you're emptying a cup holder in your car. And there it is, a 1998 Lincoln penny. No cine, no obvious drama, just copper-colored history sitting in your palm. You flip it over and something feels off. No mint mark. And that's where most people stop thinking. Because to the untrained eye, a missing mint mark might seem like damage, wear, or just nothing at all. But in the world of U.S. coin production, details like that can change everything. Here's the tension that collectors understand and most people miss. In 1998, pennies were primarily struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which means many coins legitimately have no mint mark. So at first glance, this coin shouldn't be rare at all. Or would it already be gone, spent without a second thought? Now, is every 1998 penny worth that? Absolutely not. But here's the psychological shift that matters. Rarity in coin collecting is not just about age. It's about scarcity combined with demand, condition, and verified error classification. And demand for Lincoln cents is not weak. In fact, it's relentless. Why? Because millions of people grew up with them, handled them daily, and now, decades later, they're realizing they may have overlooked variations that were never meant to be widely recognized. Think about that for a second. Something you once used to buy gum could now be debated in a high-stakes collector environment where a single verified anomaly changes everything. Now let's interrupt this for a moment, because this is important. If you're thinking, I've seen pennies my whole life, they can't be worth anything serious. Let me ask you something directly. How many of those pennies have you actually examined under proper light, magnification, or grading standards? The excitement around coins like the 1998 no mint mark cent isn't just about the coin itself. It's about the possibility it represents. The idea that everyday people, not professional investors, could be holding overlooked assets in their homes. And that idea spreads fast. It creates urgency. Because once you realize something like this might exist in circulation, the question becomes, how many are still out there? And how long before they're all gone into private collections? That urgency fuels searching. It fuels collecting. It fuels bidding wars. And in rare cases, it fuels life-changing sales. But there's a deeper layer here that separates amateurs from serious collectors. Authentication. A coin isn't valuable because someone says it is. It becomes valuable when grading authorities verify its rarity, condition, and error status. That's the gatekeeper moment where speculation becomes reality. And that's exactly where fortunes are made, or missed entirely. A simple penny, sitting unnoticed for years, is finally evaluated. It's examined under proper lighting. It's checked for dye errors, strike anomalies, surface condition, and minting characteristics. It's submitted for grading. And suddenly, it's no longer just a penny. It becomes a certified collectible. Now here's where the emotional weight hits. Because once a coin enters the verified collector market, it stops being about what it costs to make and starts being about what someone is willing to pay. That's where demand takes over. That's where competition builds. And that's where numbers that once sounded impossible begin to appear in auction discussions. Not because every coin reaches those extremes, but because the top tier of verified rarities sets the tone for the entire market. And even if your coin isn't the headline piece, the mindset shift is everything. Because collectors who understand grading, rarity markers, and market timing consistently position themselves ahead of those who don't. Let's pause for a second. If you've made it this far, here's the real question you should be asking. Not is this coin real, but do I know how to recognize value when it's in front of me? Because that is the difference between passive ownership and active opportunity. Now bring this back to the 1998 no-mint mark Lincoln cent. Even if most examples are common, the conversation it has created has one undeniable impact. People are checking their coins again. Closely. Intentionally. Sometimes for the first time in decades. And that alone has already changed outcomes for collectors, estate sellers, and everyday individuals discovering overlooked pieces in old collections. Here's the final insight. Wealth in collectibles doesn't always come from chasing the rarest item in the world. It often comes from recognizing the unusual in the ordinary before everyone else does. And right now, Lincoln cents, especially error-related and condition-sensitive ones, remain one of the most actively discussed entry points into that world. So if you take anything from this, take this mindset forward, what looks ordinary today might not be ordinary at all. It might just be waiting for the right set of eyes. And in the world of rare coins, the right moment and the right knowledge can change everything. Because sometimes the smallest coin in your hand carries the biggest question of all. What if this is the one? If you've ever dismissed the coins sitting in jars, drawers, or old coffee cans as just spare change, what you're about to hear might completely shift the way you look at money forever. Because hidden inside ordinary American pockets and forgotten collections are pennies that have stunned collectors, shocked auction houses, and in rare cases, reportedly reached values as high as hundreds of thousands of dollars. One of the most talked about examples in recent years is the 1995 Lincoln 1-cent coin with no mint mark, an anomaly that has fueled excitement, speculation, and serious attention in the numismatic world, with some high-end listings and reported evaluations reaching extraordinary figures as high as $836,000. Now, before you think this sounds like just another internet rumor, stay with me. Because the truth is far more interesting than hype. And the real story behind this coin is not just about money. It's about timing, awareness, and opportunity. Act 1 begins with a simple question that most people never ask themselves. What if the most valuable asset you own isn't in your bank account, but already in your home? Imagine this for a moment. A man in his late 50s, cleaning out an old drawer in a quiet suburban house. Nothing special, just routine decluttering. He finds a small jar of pennies, the kind we all ignore. He almost throws it away. Almost. But something makes him pause. One coin looks slightly different. No mint mark. A 1995 Lincoln cent. At first, it seems like nothing. But that hesitation, that 1 second of curiosity, changes everything. Now here's where most people make a mistake. They assume all pennies are equal. But in the world of coin collecting, that assumption can be extremely expensive. And let's pause for a second, because here's a question you should be asking yourself right now. How many coins have you already spent without ever looking twice? That's the emotional trigger most people miss. The fear of lost opportunity. Not fear of danger, but fear of what you might have unknowingly let slip away. Now let's enter Act 2, where the story deepens. The 1995 Lincoln cent without a mint mark is widely discussed because it appears to break standard minting expectations. In most cases, coins struck at specific U.S. mint facilities carry identifying marks. When that mark is missing, collectors immediately pay attention. Not because every error coin is valuable, but because rare minting anomalies can become highly sought after when verified, preserved, and authenticated. And this is where excitement enters the picture. Because in numismatics, value is not just about age, it's about rarity, condition, and demand converging at the same time. A coin that looks ordinary to most people can become extraordinary in the right collector market. But here's the twist. Not every 1995 no-mint mark penny is worth life-changing money. Some are worth only a few cents over face value. Others, in exceptional condition or verified as rare error strikes, have been discussed in high-end collector circles and auction environments at dramatically higher valuations. In some reported cases, listings and collector discussions have placed top-condition examples in the hundreds of thousands, with extreme outliers reaching headline-grabbing figures like $836,000. Now, before you lean too far into excitement, here's a reality check. But stay with me, because this is important. Coin valuation is not random. It is driven by certification, grading, authenticity, and buyer demand. This is where serious collectors separate themselves from casual hopefuls. And yes, here comes another question, one that might make you sit up a little straighter. If you had a coin that could potentially change your financial situation, would you even recognize it? That pause, that moment of doubt, is exactly where opportunity lives. Let's add a pattern interrupt here. Think about this like a treasure hunt where the map is already in your pocket, but you've been told it's just loose change. It's almost funny when you think about it. People search online for wealth strategies, investment trends, side hustles, while literal physical value might be sitting in a coin jar next to the washing machine. Now we move into Act 3, where awareness turns into action. The real power of the 1995 Lincoln cent story isn't about chasing a single mythical coin. It's about developing a mindset shift. Collectors and wealth builders understand something simple but powerful. Value hides in plain sight when knowledge is missing. If you begin examining coins with even basic awareness, checking mint marks, studying condition, noticing errors, you move from passive owner to active evaluator. That shift alone is where most opportunity is created. And this is where urgency becomes real. Because coins like this don't announce themselves. They don't come with warnings or labels. They circulate quietly. They get spent, forgotten, and lost every single day. The difference between someone who misses them and someone who finds them is not luck, it's attention. Let's pause again. Quick reality check. If you have coins at home right now, you're already participating in this system whether you realize it or not. And here's the final emotional turn. Imagine discovering that a simple penny you ignored could have been authenticated, graded, and potentially sold in a high-demand collector market. Not as a guarantee, but as a possibility. That possibility alone is what drives collectors to search, evaluate, and preserve what others overlook. So what should you actually do with this information? You start simple. You don't guess value. You observe. You look for mint marks, unusual spacing, doubling errors, and unusual strikes. You compare condition. And if something stands out, you don't ignore it. You verify it through professional grading channels. Because in this world, hesitation costs money. Awareness creates advantage. And as we close this story, remember this. Wealth is not always created in loud, dramatic moments. Sometimes it starts quietly, with a coin, a jar, and a decision to look closer. The 1995 Lincoln cent no mint mark story continues to circulate in collector communities for a reason. Not because every coin is worth a fortune, but because a few rare ones can be. And that possibility is exactly why people keep looking. So the real question is not whether these coins exist. The real question is whether you're paying attention when they do. If you have ever casually tossed a penny into a jar or handed it over at a checkout counter without a second thought, this story will completely change the way you look at loose change forever. Because somewhere inside everyday circulation, inside jars, drawers, and old forgotten collections across the United States, there are pennies that are quietly rewriting financial destinies. And one of the most talked about examples in modern coin collecting circles is the 1992 D mint Mark Lincoln penny with a rare and dramatic error that has been reported in high-end numismatic discussions and auction speculation to reach figures as high as $886,000. Now, before you dismiss that number as unbelievable, stay with me, because the truth behind why coins like this command such attention is far more powerful than the number itself. It's about scarcity, timing, and the silent competition happening right now between collectors who understand one simple reality. Most people are spending what could be life-changing money without even noticing it. Imagine this for a moment. You're holding a penny, 1 cent. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. And yet, in the right condition, with the right error, it could be worth more than a luxury home. The question is not just, could it be real? The question is, what if it already passed through your hands and you didn't know? And that is where this story begins. We're not just talking about a coin. We're talking about a moment in U.S. mint history that created unintended variations. The 1992 Denver minted Lincoln cent, marked with a small d, entered circulation during a time when die variations and transitional errors were quietly slipping through quality control. Some of these pennies exhibit what collectors call close AM, or rare spacing anomalies between the letters A and M in America on the reverse side. Others show double die characteristics or subtle misalignments that most people would never notice without magnification. And here's where things get interesting, because the difference between a 1 cent coin and a six-figure collector's piece is not obvious at first glance. It never is. Now, let's pause for a second. If you're thinking, I've got a jar of pennies somewhere, you are already ahead of most people. And if you just mentally pictured it sitting in a dusty kitchen cabinet, congratulations. You're now officially part of the global treasure hunt, whether you planned on it or not. The reality is, modern coin collecting is no longer just a hobby. It has become a high-stakes market where precision, awareness, and timing can separate ordinary collectors from extraordinary outcomes. And the 1992 D Lincoln penny error is one of those coins that continues to fuel that excitement. Let's step deeper into the story. In Act 1 of this hidden financial mystery, the coin itself appears unremarkable. It enters circulation like millions of others. No announcement, no warning, just another day at the U.S. Mint. But beneath that ordinary surface, something unusual happens during production. A small percentage of coins escape with variations that should not exist. And that is exactly what transforms them from pocket change into collector legends. Now Act 2 is where things intensify. Collectors begin noticing patterns years later. A penny here, another one there. Then whispers in numismatic communities start to circulate. Have you checked your 1992 D? Look closely at the spacing. Check under magnification. And suddenly, what was once invisible becomes a target of intense global interest. This is where emotion enters the picture. Excitement builds. Fear quietly follows it. Because every collector knows the same uncomfortable truth. For every rare coin discovered, thousands more may have already been spent, lost, or destroyed. Let that sink in for a moment. You could be holding history, or you could have already let it go in a vending machine transaction without realizing it. And just when you think it cannot get more intense, the market responds. High-grade examples of rare 1992 D Lincoln penny errors, especially those with strong visual anomalies and exceptional preservation, have been discussed in auction circles and private sales at figures that reach astonishing levels, with some reported valuations climbing into the hundreds of thousands, depending on authenticity, condition, and rarity confirmation. That is where the widely circulated figure of $886,000 enters the conversation among enthusiasts and speculative listings. Now, is every 1992 D penny worth that? Absolutely not. And here is the critical distinction that separates serious collectors from hopeful beginners. Value is not in the date alone, but in the error the condition, and the verification. But here is where attention sharpens again. Because even knowing that does not reduce the urgency, it increases it. If such coins exist, and they're still occasionally being discovered in circulation, then the opportunity is not in theory. It is in action. Let's reset for a second. If you are wondering whether this is too good to be true, ask yourself something more practical. How many times have rare collectibles, from baseball cards to vintage watches, been overlooked for decades before exploding in value? The pattern is not unusual. It is consistent across markets, driven by scarcity and collector demand. And pennies are no exception. Now we move into Act 3. This is where understanding turns into advantage. Because while most people continue treating pennies as insignificant, a smaller group understands that the modern numismatic market is driven by discovery, verification, and timing. Coins like the 1992 D Lincoln penny era are not just collectibles. They are financial anomalies that reward awareness. And here is the powerful truth. The market does not wait for permission. It rewards whoever recognizes value first. There is a reason collectors use magnification tools, reference guides, and grading services. It is not just about curiosity. It is about positioning. Because in this space, knowledge is not abstract. It is financial leverage. And right now, demand for rare Lincoln cent errors remains consistently strong among collectors who actively seek verified specimens. Every confirmed discovery adds fuel to the market, reinforcing interest and pushing competitive bidding behavior when high-quality examples surface. So what does this mean for you? It means that the story of a penny is not just about metal. It is about attention. It is about understanding that value often hides in the most familiar places. And it is about recognizing that opportunity does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it sits quietly in a jar, waiting for someone to look closer. Now here is a simple thought that tends to stick with people long after they hear it. If a coin worth hundreds of thousands of dollars can look identical to a coin worth 1 cent, then the difference is not in the coin. It is in the observer. And that is where everything changes. Because once you understand what to look for, you never see change the same way again. You start noticing details. You start questioning what others ignore. And you start realizing that wealth, in many cases, begins with awareness rather than effort. So as you go back to wherever your change is stored, whether it is a drawer, a jar, or a forgotten box, remember this simple idea. Somewhere in that small collection of coins, there could be something extraordinary waiting for recognition. And the question is no longer whether rare pennies exist. The question is whether you will be the one who notices them before the rest of the world catches up. There are moments in life when wealth doesn't arrive with noise, announcements, or warning. It arrives quietly, inside something most people would never even look twice at. A penny. Not gold. Not silver. Not a rare painting in a museum. A simple Lincoln cent from 1988. And here's where it gets interesting, because what you are about to hear is not just about a coin. It's about awareness, timing, and the difference between someone who overlooks value and someone who recognizes opportunity before the rest of the world catches on. Now imagine this for a second. You're holding a handful of change from an old jar, a drawer, maybe even your car cup holder. You almost spend it without thinking, but one coin feels slightly different. No mint mark, strange shine, a detail that doesn't belong. And that tiny detail could be tied to one of the most talked about modern penny errors in the collector world. Some reports and listings across the numismatic community have claimed extraordinary valuations for rare error versions of the 1988 Lincoln cent, with figures circulating as high as $734,000 in exceptional, verified, high-grade conditions. Now pause for a second, because before excitement takes over, here's the truth most people miss. Those numbers are not typical. They represent extreme rarity, special conditions, and collector-driven demand at the highest level of the market. But here's what matters more than the number itself. The opportunity is real, and most people will walk right past it. Every year, millions of pennies pass through American hands without a second thought. Cash registers, coffee shops, old piggy banks, estate collections. And in that constant flow of copper and zinc, valuable mint errors quietly circulate unnoticed. Now here's a question for you. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny? Not glanced, not assumed, really looked. Because the 1988 Lincoln cent is one of those coins that seems ordinary until it isn't. The Philadelphia minted version carries no mint mark by design. That alone confuses many people. But in the collector world, confusion is where opportunity often hides. And here's where things get interesting. Certain rare variations, including misstrikes, die errors, and unusual production anomalies, have sparked serious attention among collectors. Some examples in pristine condition, graded and verified, have reportedly reached extremely high auction interest levels. Now, let's add tension here, because this is where most people lose money without realizing it. They assume rarity is obvious. It isn't. Rarity is silent. It doesn't announce itself. And that's exactly why valuable coins often end up spent for 1 cent, instead of preserved for life-changing value. Think about that for a moment. A coin that could potentially represent thousands, or in extreme cases, even higher collector-driven valuations, used for a gum purchase. It sounds unbelievable, but it happens every day. And now we move deeper. Let's break this down in a way that actually matters. The 1988 Lincoln cent becomes valuable in the collector world not because every version is rare, but because specific error conditions are. Things like striking anomalies, unusual planchet issues, or rare production mistakes can transform a standard penny into something highly sought after. And here's the key idea most beginners miss. Collectors don't just pay for coins. They pay for stories. A perfect coin is common. An imperfect coin with a verifiable mint error. That is where demand begins. Now, imagine holding a coin that experts would stop and examine under magnification. A coin that might show doubling in the lettering, unusual surface characteristics, or a production flaw that only occurred under very specific mint conditions. Suddenly, that penny is no longer just currency. It becomes evidence. Evidence of a mistake, frozen in time, that survives circulation. And in the collector market, survival equals value. Now, let's address something important. You may have seen sensational headlines online about pennies worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Here's the reality check most professionals agree on. Extremely high valuations, such as the widely circulated figure of $734,000, are typically tied to exceptional, verified, top-grade specimens or rare auction circumstances. They are not the standard outcome. They represent the peak of the market, not the average. But here's the emotional truth behind it. Even if only a fraction of those claims reflect reality, it still changes everything for the person who finds one. Because the difference between zero and something extraordinary is awareness. Let's add a pattern interrupt here. If pennies were boring, why do auction houses still fight over them? Why do collectors spend years searching for coins that most people would toss into a tip jar? It doesn't make sense until you realize the world of rare coins operates on a completely different logic. Scarcity, condition, and timing. And that combination is powerful enough to turn pocket change into serious wealth. Now imagine the emotional swing. From ignoring a penny to realizing it could be part of a verified error set worth significant money. That shift alone is why collectors stay alert every single day. And it leads us directly into urgency. Here's the reality that most viewers need to hear clearly. Rare coin opportunities don't wait. They don't stay visible. And they certainly don't advertise themselves. They move through circulation until someone trained enough or curious enough recognizes them. Right now, across the United States, there are likely 1988 Lincoln cents sitting in jars, drawers, and old collections that have never been checked properly. And here's the emotional pressure point. Some of them will never be looked at again. They will be spent, lost, forgotten, not because they weren't valuable, but because nobody paused long enough to recognize them. So what does this mean for you? It means awareness is the real asset. Not luck, not speculation. Awareness. And here's where urgency becomes real. The coin market continues to evolve. Collector demand fluctuates. High-grade error coins are always in competition. And when a verified specimen surfaces, it often attracts attention quickly from serious buyers and auctions. That is why collectors act fast. Not out of fear, but out of understanding. Because once an opportunity is gone, it doesn't always return. Now let's ground this in something practical. If you have old pennies, especially from the 1980s, 1970s, or earlier, there is real value in taking a second look. Not every coin will be rare. In fact, most won't. But the ones that are life-changing in perspective, if not an actual payout. And that brings us to the final thought. Wealth is not always created in big moments. Sometimes it is discovered in small ones, in quiet ones, in overlooked places, like a penny. So the next time you hear someone say, it's just 1 cent, you might want to smile, because now you understand something they don't. Value doesn't always look valuable at first glance. An opportunity doesn't always announce itself. It hides in plain sight, waiting for someone who knows where to look. In the quiet world of pocket change, where most people see nothing more than a few cents, there exists a hidden arena where ordinary coins have rewritten destinies. Today, we are stepping into one of the most talked about modern coin mysteries in American numismatics. The 1979 Lincoln 1-cent coin with no mint mark, a coin that has sparked excitement, debate, urgency, and in some circles, life-changing expectations of value that some listings and claims have pushed into the astonishing territory of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even figures as high as $722,000 being circulated online. But before you dismiss it or rush to check your drawers, understand this. This is not just about a coin. It is about timing, awareness, and the quiet fortune hiding in plain sight. Imagine this for a moment. You are sitting at your kitchen table. Loose change spills out from an old jar. Pennies, nickels, nothing special, or so it seems. You almost brush them aside. Maybe even think, who even uses pennies anymore? And that is exactly where most stories of lost opportunity begin. Because somewhere in that handful of copper-colored coins, there could be something that changes everything. Now here's where things get interesting and a little uncomfortable. Most people have no idea that certain 1979 Lincoln cents, particularly those missing expected mint identifiers or showing unusual characteristics, have become a subject of intense collector scrutiny. And in the world of rare coins, scrutiny equals opportunity. Opportunity equals demand. And demand, well, demand is where prices begin to climb in a territory most people would never believe possible for a 1-cent piece. Let's pause for a second. If you're thinking it's just a penny, that's exactly what millions of people thought before discovering that seemingly insignificant objects can hold extraordinary value. And no, this isn't hype. It's history repeating itself. Every major coin boom starts with disbelief. Every discovery starts with doubt. Now, picture this as we move into Act 1, discovery. The late 1970s were a transitional period for U.S. coinage. The Lincoln cent was still being struck in massive quantities, and errors occasionally slipped through the system. These anomalies, whether missing mint marks, misstrikes, or unusual die variations, were not meant to escape into circulation. But they did. And when they did, they quietly entered the hands of everyday Americans, blending into jars, wallets, and forgotten drawers. Here's where attention sharpens. Some 1979 Lincoln cents without expected mint markings have been examined under collectors' lenses and debated in auction circles. While not every example is valuable, the rare outliers, the ones with verified minting anomalies, are what fuel the excitement. In certain high-profile discussions and listings, dramatic valuations have appeared, including claims reaching into 6 figures and beyond. Some speculative or headline-driven listings have even referenced figures like $722,000, though in professional numismatic circles, such numbers are always treated with caution and require rigorous authentication. But here is the emotional trigger that matters: fear of overlooking something life-changing. Because right now, as you're watching this, there are people who once ignored coins just like this, only to later realize they had something rare slip through their fingers. And that is not just history, That is human behavior repeating itself. Let me ask you something directly. If a single coin could pay off debt, fund retirement dreams, or unlock a more comfortable lifestyle, would you recognize it sitting in front of you? Or would it pass through your hands unnoticed because it looks too ordinary? Now we move into Act 2, escalation. This is where curiosity turns into urgency. Collectors don't chase coins because they're shiny. They chase them because they are rare. And rarity is almost always born from mistakes, anomalies, and limited survival. The 1979 Lincoln cent varieties that attract attention often fall into that category. The challenge is not finding a coin. It is recognizing the difference between common circulation pieces and those with verified distinguishing traits. And here is where most people hesitate. What if I miss it? What if I misjudge it? That hesitation is exactly what separates casual observers from informed opportunity seekers. Because in the coin world, hesitation often costs more than action. Let's bring a bit of humor into this, because it's important to stay grounded. Think about it. Most people can identify a Starbucks order with military precision, but hand them a rare coin and suddenly it's, I think this is money. That contrast is exactly why opportunities still exist in the world of coins today. Now the excitement builds. Because even though not every 1979 Lincoln cent is valuable, the broader truth is this. Error coins and rare mint variations continue to surface in circulation, estate collections, and forgotten coin jars across America. And when they do, collectors move quickly. The market responds quickly, and prices, when verified, can escalate dramatically based on condition, rarity, and demand. This is where the emotional pull of urgency becomes real. Coins do not wait. Markets do not pause. And opportunities are rarely announced in advance. They are discovered. At this point, the perspective changes. You're no longer just hearing about a coin. You are understanding a system. A system where knowledge transforms ordinary objects into valuable assets. Where awareness separates missed opportunity from potential gain. The 1979 Lincoln cent, especially in its rare error or anomaly forms, represents more than metal. It represents a mindset shift. It asks a simple but powerful question. Are you looking closely enough at what you already own? Because here is the truth that seasoned collectors understand deeply. Wealth is not always found in new acquisitions. Sometimes it is hidden in what you already have but never examined properly. And while sensational online figures like $722,000 circulate and capture attention, the real takeaway is not the number, it is the possibility. The possibility that something small, overlooked, and ordinary could be anything but. This is where authority meets action. If you are serious about exploring whether you have rare Lincoln cents or other valuable coins, the next step is not guesswork. It is education, careful inspection, and understanding verified markers of authenticity. Condition matters. Minting variations matter. And professional evaluation is what ultimately determines true market value. But more importantly, awareness matters most. Because without awareness, even the most valuable coin is just another penny in a jar. Let that sink in for a moment. A coin that costs 1 cent, potentially holding a value that changes everything. As we close this journey, remember this simple truth. Every collector today once started with curiosity. Every discovery began with doubt, and every valuable coin ever found was once dismissed as ordinary. So the next time you hear someone say, "It's just a penny," you might want to smile, because now you know better. And in the world of rare coins, knowing better is often where wealth begins.